you would, be turning to 1 Samuel chapter 30. It's good to see everybody. I pray you've had a good week so far. It's really praying and trying to figure out what to teach on Sunday night, and I worked Monday and going back and forth in my mind a few things. Tuesday I was lined up to start a job, and the lady's daughter got sick and I couldn't get into their house. So I actually had a day off there I could study a little bit. And I felt led to pass this along. I don't think it's going to come out as good for you guys as it did for me Tuesday morning. But it's something I needed to study, and I'm sure it's something we've all heard. Like most things, just because we've heard it a lot doesn't mean we practice it like we should. And Tuesday morning, I got up and I was praying about the day, and I got in the Word, and I was needing encouragement. And I was thinking about the forms of encouragement that come our way. I have 3 wrote down. The first one is prayer and the Word. I put those as one. They exist together. So if we're going to get encouragement, we have to get in the Word and we have to pray like we should. And this is applying personally. The second way I have, or the second form of encouragement, I believe, is God's people. We can encourage one another. There's another side to that. We could also discourage one another. We don't want to do that. But the third form of encouragement is recalling blessings in our life. And to me, outside of prayer and the Word, this is the most important one, because God give us a memory. He give us emotions. We can be happy and sad. We can cry. We can get angry. Not saying they're all right, but we have a memory. And I can remember things that God's brought me through, and that's encouraging. So that's kind of what we're going to look at tonight. So, like I said, I don't feel good about this, but it really helped me yesterday. So 1 Samuel 30, verses 1 and 2, it says, "And it came to pass, when David and his men were come to Ziklag on the 3rd day, that the Amalekites had invaded the south, and Ziklag was smitten, or the south, and Ziklag, and smitten Ziklag, and burned it with fire, and had taken the women captives were therein. They slew not any, either great or small, but carried them away, and went on their way." So David and his men come back, and this is something we all know. But they come back and they're tired, they're wore out. Just like when you come home after a long day, what do you want? You want to see your wife, you want to see your kids, right? I mean, that's our comfort. That's when I come home, I want to know that they're okay. How was your day? Let's talk. They come back and they're not there. But something that really stuck out to me is David is going through a trial or something rough here due to sin of someone else before him. He came back and he's having to go through something here because these people weren't supposed to be here. We're going to look at that, but also notice that in a hard time, in this trial or this challenge that's in his life, there's God's mercy. It said, "And had taken the women captives that were therein, and they slew not any, neither great or small." There's mercy there. There's hope. They're still alive. We read over that so many times and well, they're gone. But God spared them. The women and children were alive. No evidence of them around. As the men come back and they're going through the camp, they don't see any of the women and children. God was merciful in the sparing of their lives. Encouragement should have been drawn from this. Why don't we see the encouragement in a situation like that where it seems all is lost and there's going to be trouble to follow? Because we're focused on the problem. We don't see the mercy that was given us because we're too busy focused on what's been taken from us. We don't see the grace because we just know we're missing something. Mercy's there, but you got to be willing to look. So we see in verses 1 and 2, something came up, a problem came up in David's life that was out of his control. Any problem that comes up is out of our control. So I know we know this, but to do it right, I think we need to turn back to chapter 15 here in the same book, 1 Samuel, and let's look at this. So we know in the first two verses, David is going through a rough trial due to the sin of someone else before him. Guess what? It trickles down. We can pass it on. 1 Samuel 15, let's read the first three verses. It says, Samuel also said unto Saul, the Lord sent me to anoint thee to be king over his people, over Israel. Now therefore hearken thou unto the voice of the words of the Lord. Thus saith the Lord of hosts, I remember that which Amalek did to Israel, how he laid wait for him in the way when he came up from Egypt. Now go and smite Amalek, and utterly destroy all that they have, and spare them not, but slay both man and woman, infant and suckling, ox and sheep, camel and ass. I'll jump down to verse 10. It says, Then came the word of the Lord unto Samuel, saying, It repenteth me that I have set up Saul to be king, for he is turned back from following me, and hath not performed my commandments. And it grieved Samuel, and he cried unto the Lord all night. And when Samuel rose early to meet Saul in the morning, it was told Samuel, saying, Saul came to Carmel, and behold, he set him up a place, and is gone about, and passed on, and gone down to Gilgal. And Samuel came to Saul, and Saul said unto him, Blessed be thou of the Lord. I have performed the commandment of the Lord. Well, Saul was lying to himself here, wasn't he? He knew he messed up. Verse 14 says, And Samuel said, What meaneth then this bleating sheep, and of the oxen to sacrifice unto the Lord thy God, and the rest we have utterly destroyed? Then Samuel said unto Saul, Stay, and I will tell thee what the Lord hath said to me this night. And he said unto him, Say on. And Samuel said, When thou wast little in thine own sight, wast thou not made the head of the tribes of Israel? And the Lord anointed thee king over Israel. And the Lord sent thee on a journey, and said, Go and utterly destroy the sinners, the Amalekites, and fight against them until they be consumed. Wherefore then didst thou not obey the voice of the Lord, but didst fly upon the spoil, and didst evil in the sight of the Lord? I'm saying that name wrong. It just hit me. So we see that the problem that came up in David's life, and at a bad time, I mean, when this trial came in David's life, it wasn't like everything in David's life was going smooth. And we can relate to that. You know, there's the old saying, when it rains, it pours, you know. And it just seems like sometimes you go through what used to seem to me like days or weeks, and now lately it's been years where it's just one thing after another, and it's like, what's next? You know, you start to get more wore down, and things start to weigh on you even more. So the sins of someone before were being allowed by God to affect God's people and David later on. We've got to watch this. We must remember, you know, we're selfish, and we think it only applies to our family and our children. That if I'm doing something, if I have a habit that I shouldn't have, and my children see it, that they're going to think it's okay, and it's something that they're going to do. That's a selfish thought in a way, because the sins today can affect this church 20 years later. This church can pay in 20 years for something that's done this month because we're not doing things like we're supposed to be. It's a great responsibility. And I was thinking about that yesterday morning in talking about the direction of our church more specifically. We've got to be patient. We've got to wait on God. We got to get out of the way so he can get it right. So go back to chapter 30, verse 3. 1 Samuel chapter 30, verse 3. It says, and their sons and their daughters were taken captive. So it's one thing after another. This was another moment in David's life where he couldn't help what was happening to him. He was not in control of the situation, but his reactions would speak volumes. So many times our reactions set up trouble for us later on. I'm thinking of an instance in my mind where I wasn't too happy with somebody, and I was trying to hold them accountable for something that they did to me. But my reaction, I never lost my temper. I never cussed him, but my reaction could have been better. I could have been more loving or more patient. But because of the way I reacted, it caused me trouble later on. Saul wasn't where he was supposed to be. Saul's the one who gave in to temptation. Saul's reactions were the ones that were wrong. And now a later generation of men are paying for those mistakes. Verses 4 and 5 say, then David and the people that were with him lifted up their voice and wept until they had no more power to weep. And David's 2 wives were taken captive, Ahinoam the Jezreelitess, and Abigail the wife of Nabal the Carmelite. So the pain is real, the confusion is real, the weariness is real in our lives. What these men were going through was a real thing. Look at that. It says they had no more power to weep in verse 4. They had no power left. They poured out all they had. And David's here in this position as their leader. And he's God's chosen. But guess what? He's not exempt. He's going through pain or loss. And he's going through suffering just like everybody else. But he's got to think about his problems and everybody else's. That's something we often forget about a good leader. Verse 6 says, and David was greatly distressed, for the people spake of stoning him, because the soul of all the people were grieved, every man for his sons and for his daughters. But David encouraged himself in the Lord his God. So everything else we've read was just to get to the end of that one verse. So I know that it's been taught before, but in life we cannot help the things that happen to us. The reaction is our responsibility. That's what we're going to be judged for. David couldn't help what was happening, but the only thing David could help was how he was going to react in this situation. And we've thought a lot of the time in the past, I believe it was a lesson even where Elijah's servant, he saw the people surrounding him, and the very first thing he prayed for to God was for his servant. His reaction was for someone else. David's problems as leader are now twofold. He had his own loss or suffering to go over in his mind and his life, and now his own men, the people that had fallen him into war, and everything he'd ever said was good enough. They believed in him that much. God had given them a heart to follow him, and now all of a sudden things get hard, and not only are they turning their back on him, they're talking about stoning him right then and there. And he's watching them say, don't you pick up that rock. But people will turn on you that fast. A leader carries their own burdens and the burdens of others. That's something that we have to stop. Again, like Sunday morning, we read this and we put ourselves in the shoes of David because we're looking for that encouragement tonight. But how many times are we ready to jump on somebody for something instead of waiting it out? The flesh, and nobody hears above it, it always has to be somebody else's fault. Usually we point a finger at somebody else before we point it back at ourselves. It can be your fault. It can be just a problem. But we want someone else to take it out on, don't we? We want to make somebody else responsible, or we want to make somebody else feel bad for the things that are going on. It says in the end of verse 6, but David encouraged himself in the Lord. First, I want to look at the writing itself. David encouraged himself in the Lord, his God. God was real and personal to David. David was God's, and so God was David's. He encouraged himself in the Lord, his God. It doesn't say Israel. It's a personal relationship. And if he was going to get through the personal problem, he needed a personal God. Second, let's ask the question, is it possible to encourage yourself in the Lord? I mean, like sitting here right now, going through something, knowing that you're facing a trial. Is it possible to encourage yourself? Because oftentimes, even if we do encourage ourselves, it doesn't last very long because we start focusing on the problem again. Because of the things that God has brought us through, it's absolutely possible. So we'll be back here in just a minute, but let's go to Romans chapter 5. We read this Sunday evening. Romans 5, I said Sunday evening, it's one of my go-to chapters for encouragement, and so is 1 Samuel chapter 30. And I can't really tell you why, but I draw from them. Let's read the first 4 verses of Romans 5 there. We're going to focus on 3 and 4. It says, "Therefore, being justified by faith, we have peace with God through our Lord Jesus Christ, by whom also we have access by faith into this grace wherein we stand, and rejoice in hope of the glory of God. And not only so, but we glory in tribulations, also knowing that the tribulation worketh patience, and patience experience, and experience hope." It's like we talked about Sunday. It's not fun or exciting to go through trials or tribulations. It's work. It's hard. It leaves scars. There's good scars and bad scars. There's scars on my body of things that I've done that was stupid. Okay? Shouldn't have tried to jump that or whatever. But there's scars that I look at and I'm like, I'll never forget that. There's good scars and bad scars. It makes us patient. It makes us wait upon the Lord our God. It gives us experience. You know, I was trying to think of the best way to explain, to really get this across, and I couldn't come up with anything but a football analogy. But it's like 7 minutes to go in a game. You're down by 30 points, and there's 11 men on the field. 10 of you walk into a huddle, and there's one guy saying, "We can do this." And everybody else is like, "Well, I don't know, but you're my teammate. I think a lot of you. I'll give it my best." And in 7 minutes, whatever, you come back and you win that game. The next time you're down 30 points in the fourth quarter with 7 minutes to go, you have hope that you can win. You believe that you can come back and do it. So when I go through a trial that I don't want to go through 8, 9, 10 years ago, and it hurt, and it lasted what seemed like forever, and I go through something now, I go back to that trial and I'm like, I made it then. God brought me through it then. We're going to win this thing. There's that one voice saying we're going to get through this when everybody else is down. Psalm chapter 13, if you'll turn there. I don't believe it has anything to do with what we're reading in 1 Samuel 30 as far as David writing them at the same time. Actually, in my Bible, it says a prayer for God's grace on the heading. But I think it ties in perfectly. Psalms chapter 13, verse 1. Actually, let's read it all, and then we'll come back and look at each verse. It says, Psalm 13:1 says, "How long wilt thou forget me, O Lord? Forever? How long wilt thou hide thy face from me? How long shall I take counsel in my soul, having sorrow in my heart daily? How long shall mine enemy be exalted over me? Consider and hear me, O Lord my God. Lighten my eyes, lest I sleep the sleep of death. Lest my enemy say, I have prevailed against him, and those that trouble me rejoice when I am moved. And in verse 5, it's the fourth quarter. It says, but I have trusted in thy mercy. My heart shall rejoice in thy salvation. I will sing unto the Lord because he hath dealt bountifully with me. So verse 1, how long wilt thou forget me, O Lord, forever? How long wilt thou hide thy face from me? Sometimes it seems like the storms of life are just put in park outside of our lives or our house, and it's just constantly, it just never moves. It's just blowing against us all the time. Our place of refuge, the things we cherish, it seems like they're under attack. How long will this last? It started 3 weeks ago. It started 5 years ago. How much longer is this going to go on? How much longer are you going to allow this to have victory here? How long will you allow it, Lord? We ask the question while we're saying, how long will you allow it? We say, Lord, how long will you be distant from me? Because we feel like he's moved. Because we're focused on the storm and not on God. Again, this is verse 2 says, how long given me is running low. It's something I can't get away from. You know the things that we can't get away from? Family problems, church problems, and work problems. Everything else, whatever. I can come here and get away from it. Family are going to follow you to work and church. Problems in the church are going to follow you in the family and to work. And problems at work usually follow you everywhere you go. It's a daily thing. We cry out, Lord, how long will you allow the storm to be here? I am yours, and yet those who despise me and hate me, they're getting victory over me, Lord. Lord, hold my hand through it. Verse 3 says, consider and hear me, O Lord my God. Lighten my eyes, lest I sleep the sleep of death. We think it's the end every time we go through a storm. A lot of the time we think that, well, this is it. I had a good run, Death is close. Things are happening. We're talking to God. We're pouring our hearts out. We read in chapter 30 of 1 Samuel where the men had no more power. We do all this knowing that God knows what's going on. But I was thinking about that. He wants to hear it from us. If I know Reese is doing something and he doesn't know that I know it, I don't want to have to go to him and say, hey, I heard this was going on. I want him to come to me and I want him to tell me. It's a personal relationship. It makes the Father proud of the Son. You want your children, and God wants us to give it up without being forced to come before him with a repentant heart. And being honest about the things we're going through. There's nothing wrong with saying, Lord, this is going on in my life. There's a storm outside, and it's been here for years, it feels like. Guide me, help me. Get honor and glory in this somehow. Verse 4 says, lest mine enemy say, I have prevailed against him. Lest mine enemy say, I have prevailed against him. We don't want anyone to say they prevailed over us. That there are those, and even some we wouldn't consider enemies, that rejoice when we're troubled. There's going to be people who like to see you down. I don't think that the beginning of this verse is pride. I think he's being honest. I think there's slight disappointment with David because he was expecting to get delivered from this long ago. He's praying that God is going to do it. But at the end of that, we have to say, thy will be done, not mine. And so slight disappointment creeps in. Because David was counting so hard on deliverance. Verse 5 is where it turned. We talked about that. It says, but I have trusted in thy mercy. My heart shall rejoice in thy salvation. all the stuff that we read. I don't know what to do. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I don't know what waits for me. I don't even know if I'll get through the storm tonight to see tomorrow. But then there's that word but. It says, but I have trusted in thy mercy. Who else gives mercy? God created it. Even in this time when we know the future is shaky and it's unclear, I will rejoice in thy salvation. How do you get through the storms in life of uncertainty? Not knowing what tomorrow holds, not knowing if you'll have a job, not knowing if sickness or health is going to be at risk, not knowing not knowing the shape of our country and what it's going to be in the next 4 to 8 years. I mean, there's stuff going on now. 20, 30 years ago, if they'd said that, them people wouldn't have the guts to say it. I mean, just like that, it can change. I don't know how we got on that. You get through the storm of uncertainty by rejoicing. You rejoice. If you want to get through uncertain times, you rejoice. Rejoice is a great delight or joy or a joyful showing. It's an outward showing of something. He says in 5, he says, my heart shall rejoice in thy salvation. No matter what's going on in this physical fleshly life, the eternal is taken care of. Why do we worry about the flesh so much then? And I'm talking to me. You think about that. My eternity is sealed. Why am I so worried about a storm that's going to last 80 years at the most? Because it's real. The storm's real. I scribbled this down yesterday morning. In the storm, be the lighthouse. The lighthouse is there for the storm. It's there for the lighthouse is still out there in the storm. It feels the pressure changes in the atmosphere. It gets the wind. It gets the cold. It gets the humidity. It gets beat against by the waves. But the light on the inside shines to the outside still. No matter what's going on the outside, no matter how hard things are, the light on the inside, and it's not my light. I can't glory in that. Set in. Don't run from it. Don't spread fear. Spread encouragement. Spread the light. You know, the storm shutters and the lights hitting hard outside, the light gets dim. In the darkest of night, in the middle of a storm, when you can't even see your hand in front of your face, that little bitty dim light shines enough. Well, why are we talking about shining? Because we have children and younger people in here looking at us. Because there's a next generation who has to take this church and take it to the next generation. Because we want, I'm not going to say it. We want a generation coming up that's not going to vote for socialism. I mean, we got to teach them right, though, in our homes. And when things are hard, and in my own home, this is I feel so much. But you know, when I have a bad day or things get tight, I'm uncertain. I don't want my kids to feel that, and it's good. It's good. It's a teaching lesson for them. It's a don't be like me lesson. But it can't get to the point where my faith wavers and they pick up on it. Verse 6, it says, I will sing unto the Lord because he hath. Start singing. Praise God. Give him the honor and glory. Sing to him because he is worthy, because he deserves it. If the storm ends up taking you and all is lost, go back to the end of verse 5 and rejoice in thy salvation. Sing about that. Sing because he hath dealt bountifully with you. That word bountifully means a generous bestowing of gifts or favor. It's given and provided for abundantly. So let's look at 1 Samuel one more time and we'll close out.